You can't use this road ever again. That's what Richard Harrow, president of the Cedar Ridge HOA, spat at me one wet morning, his finger stabbing the humid air like a bayonet. His crew was already welding a motorized steel gate across the only road to my farm. Sparks hissed into the mud. Two board members nodded behind him like dashboard bobbleheads keeping time with his temper. I stood there with fence mud on my boots, staring at a barricade cutting me off from my own home. For a heartbeat, I thought it was a prank. Then he handed me a notice. Join the HOA and pay dues or lose access forever. He called it protecting property values, that phrase people use like cologne to cover something rotten. What he didn't know was I'd spent 2 decades as a military engineer, trained to get through walls, over, around, and when needed, under them. If he wanted a war, he'd just lit the fuse. The first time the HOA came marching, I clocked the tells. Richard had that country club calm, but every other sentence slid sideways. We have standards here. Some folks don't fit the neighborhood vibe. Later, I'd learned delivery drivers with darker skin were turned away more often, and a mixed-race family got cited for non-compliant porch decor. Rules weren't rules to him. They were a net he threw where he wanted. My name's Miles Carter. I bought 60 acres in Redstone County because I wanted quiet, not committees. My deed was ironclad. My boundaries surveyed. My promise simple. Nobody dictates how I live, but the only road to my land ran through Cedar Ridge. For decades, locals used that stretch. Farmers, school buses, even the county fire department. No one blinked until Richard took the gavel. Then the road stopped being a lifeline and became leverage. He told me I could chip in as a good neighbor by joining the HOA. I told him my land wasn't in their subdivision and never would be. He smiled thinly. We can't just let outsiders come through. That word stuck to me like grit. Outsiders. The next morning, machinery woke me. A motorized gate went in like a jaw of steel. Then they dug a trench before it, a muddy moat. Richard sat in a camp chair under a sunshade, sipping iced tea like a plantation boss in a postcard. When I confronted him, he called it community improvements to maintain character, another phrase with teeth. The deputy who finally showed shrugged and said civil easement cases take months. Meanwhile, the HOA owned the strip and could control access. So I improvised. I blazed a dirt bike trail through the woods and called a service buddy to airdrop pallets of feed by helicopter. Richard almost choked on his tea when the chopper hovered over Cedar Ridge. He filed complaints about aerial disturbance. The sheriff tossed them, but the paper storm began. Noise violations I couldn't legally receive because I wasn't a member. Certified letters about soil destabilization from my bike tracks. Each envelope ended with the same threat. Failure to comply will result in legal action. Translation: drown him in paper. Then came the first real scare. A summer thunderhead rolled in. An ambulance, lights blazing, got stuck at the trench, trying to reach my elderly neighbor. We hauled the EMTs through my rough trail with a quad and a flatbed. He lived, but barely. That night, I stared at the gate in the rain and decided if Richard wanted to dig down, I'd go deeper. I called 811, no utilities. I ran slope lines with a builder's level and marked a route under the road. My old specialty wasn't pretty, it was precise. I sketched a reinforced tunnel. A culvert wide enough for my truck, braced with timber and scrap steel, gravel bed for drainage, a box fan ventilation rig on a salvaged generator. Then I called 2 service buddies. You're telling me an HOA tyrant blockaded you? They laughed. We're in. We worked by moonlight. Pickaxes, diamond drills, plywood ribs, steel braces. Every shovel of soil was an inch of freedom. Meanwhile, Richard strutted by day, tossing dog whistles like breadcrumbs. We can't allow just anyone to pass, he told a resident eyeing my pasture. When a Latino UPS driver parked and started hauling packages across the trench, Richard shouted he'd call federal. The driver deadpanned, "I am federal," and kept walking. My cameras caught every second. By week 2, the tunnel was near done. I overbuilt because I've seen roofs sag and lives go with them. Cross-braced every 6 feet, gravel 6 inches deep, water weep holes every 10 feet, vent pipe to daylight. I test drove at midnight. Headlights sucked the darkness toward me. Braces groaned but held. I emerged on the county road, past the trench, past the steel smile of Richard's gate, and parked where he'd see me at sunrise. When he arrived, clipboard in hand, I leaned on my truck and waved. His gaze bounced from me to the gate to a faint hump in the roadside duff, my disguised tunnel mouth. The realization climbed his face like a shadow. He sputtered, then raged. My cameras recorded everything. I posted the clip everywhere. HOA boss builds a moat, gets outsmarted by a tunnel. 2 things happened at once. The county laughed, and the people he'd targeted started talking. A black teacher cited for a too bright teal door. A South Asian family warned their relatives' cars didn't look like residents. A biracial teen written up for loitering at the neighborhood pond while his white friends skated by. These weren't random. These were lines drawn in invisible ink. Richard retaliated the only way a bully who loves paperwork knows how, a lawsuit. He accused me of destruction of community infrastructure, unauthorized excavation, and endangering residents. He expected legal quicksand to swallow me. Then I hired my lawyer, Rebecca Sloan, black, razor calm, civil rights sharp. She'd fought rural access cases where character meant keep certain people out. She flipped through Richard's letters and smirked. He wrote his motive in the margins. We countersued for harassment, obstruction, and reckless endangerment. Exhibit A, the ambulance delay. Exhibit B, the stack of bogus notices. Exhibit C, video of the trench and the gate. Then came Exhibit D. A bored insider slid us internal emails. Richard bragged about leveraging access until Carter complies. He warned that letting pass-through traffic would change the character of Cedar Ridge. People who talk like that always hear themselves as polite. The judge set a hearing for early fall. Tension simmered. Richard installed floodlights, motion sensors, and hired a 20-year-old security kid with aviators and a badge he bought online. The kid tried to wave down an actual deputy for ID once. The deputy just stared until the kid melted into his golf cart. Richard held an HOA safety meeting where he warned about outsiders sneaking through tree lines. My neighbor recorded it on her phone. Half the room looked uncomfortable. The other half looked relieved. Someone finally filmed him. Then came another emergency. A young mother in the subdivision went into rapid labor. The trench slowed the ambulance again. We guided EMTs through my tunnel, straight to the family. They made it. The baby girl breathed, pink and loud. Her father pressed a shaking thank you note into my hand the next day. You saved her first breath. That card sat on my mantle and turned my anger into mission. Rebecca built the case like a bridge, no flourish, pure load-bearing. The night before court, she walked the tunnel with me and checked every brace. If they claim it's unsafe, we answer with facts, she said. A sunrise later, the courthouse buzzed. Reporters clustered on the steps. How long is your tunnel? Do you regret defying the HOA? I kept it simple. No regrets. Inside, cedar varnish and old paper. The judge called the case. Cedar Ridge HOA via Carter. Richard sat stiff in a Navy suit that tried to look humble. His lawyer painted me as a rogue tunneler and muttered, eco-terrorist. A snicker rippled through the gallery. Then Rebecca stood, measured, precise. This is not about bylaws, she said. It is about a man using private rules as a weapon, disproportionately against people he decided didn't belong. And in doing so, he endangered lives. Mr. Carter's property is landlocked. The law recognizes a right of ingress and egress regardless of who holds the asphalt. They dug a trench that blocked ambulances. That's not governance, that's recklessness. She rolled out exhibits like a demolition charge, emails projected on a screen. Richard's words in 12-point font, leverage access, change the character, echoed louder than any shout. The UPS driver testified and got a laugh when he repeated, "Lady, I am federal." The fire marshal said flatly the gate and trench violated emergency access standards. The baby's father held up a photo, voice cracking as he thanked the court for the tunnel. Rebecca produced my blueprints, soil notes, brace spacing, and a video of me measuring deflection with a feeler gauge. She didn't posture. She just stacked facts until they weighed a ton. Then she called Richard. He tried being smooth. It always starts smooth. Standards, expectations, protecting residents. Rebecca asked who counted as outsiders. He dodged. She asked whether darker-skinned delivery drivers got more stop-and-question incidents. He said he couldn't recall. She asked whether he considered ambulances when approving the trench. He said it was irrelevant to our private community. The judge stopped writing and stared over his glasses. The gallery went still. In closing, Rebecca's voice didn't rise. It lowered. "This is how it happens, Your Honor. It begins with words like standards and character, then gates, and then trenches, and then a delayed ambulance. The law exists to stop that slide." The gavel came down like thunder. The actions of the Cedar Ridge HOA were reckless, malicious, and in violation of Mr. Carter's rights. This court recognizes his easement and orders immediate removal of the gate and trench at HOA expense, with damages and attorney's fees awarded. Further, Mr. Richard Harrow is fined for abuse of authority and removed as HOA president effective immediately. Air rushed out of the room. Richard sagged like a punctured tire. Outside, cameras flashed. I didn't gloat. I said what felt true. It feels like justice. Days later, county crews sliced up the gate and backfilled the moat. Sparks hissed again, but this time they sounded like freedom. Ellen Drake, a quiet schoolteacher, won a special election and opened the books. She apologized publicly, something I didn't know I needed until I heard it. People started talking without looking over their shoulders. A black teacher showed screenshots of the too bright door citation. A Filipino nurse shared the letter warning her visiting cousins their minivan didn't look like residents. A white retiree admitted he'd stayed quiet because Richard sounded official. Silence broke and the neighborhood exhaled. My tunnel stayed by choice. I hung a welded sign above the entrance. Harrow Passage, never again. People took photos. Children posed like explorers. We threw a liberation cookout, band on a flatbed, smoke curling from grills, veterans with flags. The sheriff shook my hand. Rebecca arrived in a red blazer and dark glasses. A half-dozen kids, black, brown, white, lined up to ask how to be a lawyer like her. I gave tours. The fee jar funded hay for neighbors who needed a hand. Richard sold his house quietly. Moved somewhere, nobody knew his name or his trench. The road became what roads are supposed to be, boring. A UPS truck rumbled by. The driver grinned and honked. The elderly neighbor waved from his porch. The baby's first birthday came with a slice of sheet cake and a tiny frosting tunnel drawn in blue. I kept the card by my door. You saved her first breath. When the dust settled, the lesson glowed in the grain of everything we'd rebuilt. It starts small. Words like standards and character. Looks that last a second too long. Citations that land heavier on certain families than others. Then the concrete is poured and the trenches dug, and suddenly an ambulance can't pass. Power doesn't need to shout to be ugly. Sometimes it smiles and says it's protecting the neighborhood. When that smile tries to wall you in, know your rights, document everything, link arms with your people, and stand your ground. And if they go low, go under. If this story hits home, tell me where you're watching from and drop your own HOA or racism-run wild story in the comments. More are coming because bullies hate sunlight and we've got plenty to shine. Tell me where you're watching from and share your own battles with unfair rules or power. Hungry people. And if you haven't already, subscribe because more stories are coming and you won't want to miss the next twist.